Hello. So hopefully we've started now. For those watching live, thank you for joining. Quite a few things to cover, and I just want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So I suggest we get going. So why are we here? We want to get practical and bring to life how AI can be used right now to solve practical problems in the FinCrime space. So as well as some quick wins, we'll also cover some of the more strategic plays, but we really want to focus on making it real. So there will be some demos throughout. So I know there'll be like very different level of AI usage and AI adoption across this group, but hopefully there'll be something of interest, whether you're early in the journey or already well on your way. So I'll just do a quick round of intros before we get going. So I'm Roger. So I've got about 20 years of experience in FinCrime. So about half of that in tech consulting, designing and building solutions for clients, and about half of that vendor side, building software as a service. So what gets me excited is using tech to solve problems, make people's working lives better. So I lead the tech and data side of BeyondFS. We've also got Matthew joining us. So he brings over 10 years of experience in FinCrime tech. He's worked closely with financial institutions to modernize their detection capabilities. And today, Matthew's going to share his point of view on how AI can be quickly pulled together to deliver real impact in financial crime. We also have Sam. So Sam has over 8 years experience in FinCrime tech and data, with expertise across solution architecture, solution design and implementation, as well as FinCrime reporting. So over the last 18 months or so, Sam has been very focused on how AI can be used to reshape FinCrime prevention and compliance. He's going to take us through how AI can be used to tackle some of the bigger and more strategic challenges. So quickly, just kind of in terms of some hygiene factors, how we're going to run this. So we're going to share our perspectives and there'll be a few demos. So I think 4 or 5 different demos to bring these to life. The session is being recorded, so we'll make that available after the session. But also we want to hear from you. So we're going to post 4 or 5 polls through the session that will give you time to respond to, but also there's open Q&A. So please do drop any questions into that Q&A feature. We'll save some time at the end to go through some of these. If we don't get to your question, don't worry. We'll send you a response after the session. Okay, so hopefully we're sharing some material now. If we can bring that up. Lovely, thank you. So if we go to the next page. Thank you. Right, so just in terms of setting the scene before we get into the practical session that Matthew and Sam are going to take us through. So in terms of kind of context, I think on LinkedIn, we see lots of thoughtware, and I guess ironically, a lot of Gemini created pictures of what things like good AI governance looks like, but not much about what solutions can actually look like. So today we want to answer that question. Now that we've got these great tools, what can we do right now that will actually be useful? In terms of what we think, I mean, it's quite clear right now there is a big opportunity to take control of your own solutions. AI tools are getting very powerful and easier to use day by day, which I think is extremely exciting. Why is that important? I think it's important because we can now create our own digital solutions for things we just couldn't solve before. Without having to reach out to some of the bigger players. We can do it better, we can do it simpler, we can do it at a lower cost because we can create the precise solution that's needed, versus going to big market vendors, big players to provide solutions that might have more features that you need or might require you to retrofit your processes. And then of course you're paying subscription fees for those as well. So it's just never been easier than now to create the exact solution that you need for your challenge. So that's the focus of this session over the next 40 minutes or so. We'll spend most of the time on the art of the possible with demos throughout that. Matthew is going to take us through some of those typical use cases that can be solved quickly with AI without the need for pilots and governance frameworks. Sam is then going to focus on the more strategic plays, so the bigger challenges. What we see is also a lot of our clients struggle with how to go from ideation through to piloting and into production. So we'll also share a quick point of view on that. Then it'll be into final thoughts section and Q&A before you close. So whatever questions you post, we'll get through as much of that as we possibly can. So I think hopefully we've got a poll. The first poll might be launching around about now, hopefully. So I'll let you go through that. I'll just give you a minute on that poll and then hand over to Matt. Okay, interesting. So good responses there. Thank you. So seeing quite a lot. So in terms of what would make you most interested in taking greater ownership, I think what's resonating quite highly there is avoiding that process retrofitting, which is obviously quite a big problem, and then improving the experience for yourselves and your colleagues as well, which certainly resonates with me as well. So thanks for posting that. That's very interesting. Right. I will hand over to Matthew to share some examples of where AI can be used quickly to improve the day-to-day.
Great, thanks, Roger. So let's have a look at what you guys can do now. So these aren't big transformation ideas. These are very simple things you can pick up, probably with tools you already have today that are available to you, with the likes of things like Copilot, for example. So just looking at the quick six examples that are listed here on the screen. So starting in the top left around those regulatory briefings. So a large consultation paper drops, for example. So things like the AMLR briefings that are going on at the moment. And you need to get through it you need to get through it quite quickly under time pressure. So there is a use case here around you can use AI to get a usable summary much faster. So you can pull out the key points in minutes. You can shape it depending on who it's for. So if you want something quite high level for a senior stakeholder, or if you want something more detailed for a working team, the AI tool can take away a lot of that initial heavy lifting away from you having to do it to give you that summary so that you can then understand the content and then deep dive further if needed. There's another one around, the second one is around policies and procedures. So this is a shift around not having to start from scratch. So where you normally have a blank piece of paper when you start writing a new policy or procedure, it's usually the hardest part. Instead, what you can do is generate a good first draft, again, within probably a matter of minutes, and then spend the time reviewing it properly, challenging it, and making sure it stands up to scrutiny and making sure it is what you need it to do. You've then got horizon scanning, number 3. So rather than manually searching for updates, relying on periodic reviews, having to scour the internet, etc., you can treat AI almost like a delegate to do that horizon scanning for you. So you can ask it questions around what were the recent fines, what has changed in the regulatory space, are there any new risks emerging across the marketplace? And what you typically get back is something that is already pulled together, it's filtered, it helps you cover a lot more ground than you probably could in a much shorter time period. So then you can spend the time understanding the content a bit more rather than having to find it. The fourth one around meeting intelligence is a very simple one, and I suspect a lot of you already do it today. But if you record the meeting, you can generate minutes and actions pretty quickly, almost instantly after the session. But even if you don't record it, if you've just taken some rough or handwritten notes, you can turn those into something structured and presentable afterwards. Again, normally just by copying and pasting it and asking it, can you put this into a particular structure, and then give it the output of what you need. Again, very quick and simple. The fifth one along is that typology research. So this is another area where you can spend a lot of time reading documents, searching for documents, scouring the internet, etc. But instead of having to go through multiple sources manually, you can pull together a summary of the key typologies, red flags, and how they are evolving across the market. It is just much easier to stay up to date without it becoming a huge piece of work every time trying to digest these very often long documents. And again, you can spend the time diving deep into a particular area after kind of understanding what that summary is. And then the last one is around the MI and reporting. So most teams spend a lot of time and effort putting together various steerco packs, reporting packs, etc. And you can use AI here to turn the data into something you can actually use. It will help you bring together a more concise and clearer narrative much quicker. So you're not spending time having to write it, pulling it together, etc. And you make sure that you get something that is quite consistent throughout. So I think across all of these, the main point here is how simple they are to pick up. It doesn't need to be some big transformational idea, but how can it impact your day-to-day job to make things much quicker and efficient? So what I wanted to do now is just spend a couple of minutes just showing you some quick examples of how this works in practice, and look at, well, what are some of the outputs that you might get back. So let me share my screen with you guys. Is that sharing?
No, it doesn't want to show it.
There we go. That should be hopefully be showing my screen.
Yeah, it's loaded.
Perfect. Great. So let's just focus on a couple of the use cases that we just spoke through very quickly through on the previous slide. So for example, the regulatory briefing summarizer. So I spent some time before this call just building out a quick agent here of what this could look like. So if I just go into the back end of the agent and just what this looks like. So we set out what the purpose of the agent is, just a summary. We then give it a series of instructions. So the title of this is to summarize regulatory briefings. We give it the purpose, general guidelines of how we want it written, what it to look like, the skills it needs. So extract documents metadata, summarize the contents, identify the top 5 to 10 key points, etc. We then give it a step-by-step process of what's required, any error handling, feedback and iterations, interaction examples, and then the follow-up and closing. So just a very simple prompt there. Now, what that looks like in practice is if I just go back to the front of the agent, what I can do now is I have already downloaded one of the consultation papers from AMLA. So if I just upload that document into here, just takes a moment. What I can do is just press process, and what it will do is it will go through the document and summarize it for me based on the structure I'd already given it beforehand. So you can see that it's now processed it, or is processing it at the moment. You've got the document overview, which gives me the title, who's issued it, the date and the place, the legal basis, the consultation deadlines, who it's for, what the purpose is. Then as I start scrolling down through the summary it's given me the exec summary and key takeaways for senior stakeholders. So the top 10, 5 to 10 takeaways, that's listed in the document, with a heading, a very quick explanation, and then the link to the document, or where in the document it's held. Immediate relevance for the firms and why it matters, and then key next steps. So very quickly, without having to read the entire document, I get a flavour and an understanding of what was in there. And then if I want to understand more points, I can then navigate to the document to look at it in more detail. We also touched on financial crime typologies. So there are a number of documents out there with a number of different typologies, red flags, and often there are overlaps between a lot of the documents because multiple typologies are applicable to multiple products, sectors, etc. So what we can do in this scenario, so what I've done here is I've downloaded two of the thematic reviews from the FCA, the 2019 and the 2025 for capital markets, just uploading them here. And what I want to understand with this particular agent is I want to understand what are all the red flags and all the typologies within these two documents. So again, I can upload the documents into Copilot, it's the tool I'm using, for example, run it, it will do some thinking for me. Just let it load. And then it gives me the consolidated list. So for example, we have the name of the typology, so mirror trading, what the description is. And again, it links back to the documents it's pulled from. In this case, it's pulled from both of them. The applicable products that it relates to. What are some of the key red flags for mirror trading that's articulated in this document, and what the primary sources are. And as I scroll down, you can see that there are a number of them. So you've got freer payment, asset transfers, wash trading, circular trading, uneconomic or rational trading strategies, etc. So it's basically gone through and pulled out all of the typologies and red flags for me in these two documents. Now, what I can do is, again, dive deeper into the documents to understand them further. I can go back through and update my internal typology library or red flag list. We can then pass that on to training teams because there might need to be some education. You might want to create new TM rules, for example. There's a number of different things, but we've been able to get through these two documents, which are pretty lengthy anyway, in a matter of minutes to have an understanding of what the summary of these documents are. The last and final one I want to look at, and again, I'm hoping this is done in practice today quite frequently with the likes of Copilot running in meetings. But as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have Copilot running in a meeting, you've not recorded it, or you've gone to a face-to-face session and you've scribbled down some handwritten notes, what you can do is just take some rough notes that and this is just a dummy scenario that I've drafted out around a fictitious rule cheating scenario meeting that I may have held. These are all my rough notes that I took. Not very consolidated, concise, bit all over the place, some gaps missing. So what I can do, again, I've configured an agent that specifically looks at this for me. I can post or paste my rough notes into here. And then what it'll do is it'll start giving me some structure to my notes. And in some cases, in this example, I didn't write down, are we talking about rule 47 or 48? And it's marked it as TBC. So there's an action further down for me to go and clarify which rule are we actually talking about, as it wasn't clear on the call. But effectively it gives you the date, the duration, the rules, who the attendees were, the backgrounds, what analysis we reviewed, the various options we discussed on the call. And again, these are all in my notes that were very loose and rough, didn't have much structure to it. It's then recorded all my decisions and outcomes, additional discussion points, and then some actions and next steps. The first, and as I mentioned, one of them, so you could be around document the rationale for reviewing the threshold. And then you got things that are flagged as unclear and missing. So the exact rule number, was it 47, 48? What was the exact date, etc. And then it suggests things like, well, what format do you want it in? Do you want it as formal minutes? Do you want it as an X summary? Do you want it as an action tracker, etc.? So you can then tailor the output depending on what you need the minutes for. Hopefully that was helpful. Just have a look at 3 practical examples. Again, I think I built these in a matter of minutes that can then be used to make my day-to-day job far more efficient and interesting. Right, let me pull the slide back up. If we can just pull up the next poll, just want to take a quick pulse check of the room around how much of this you're seeing today. So are you doing any of these in your roles today? So there's 6 examples here. So you're not using AI at all. You might be using it for other things. One of them, some of them, all of them. It'd be great just to get an understanding of where you guys are seeing this today. Okay, interesting. So a lot of you have access to AI tools. You are able to use some of these examples that we've gone through today in your day-to-day roles. There is a couple around who's using all of them. Fantastic. I like to see that. And there are some as well around not using AI at all. So maybe one worth to explore. As I say, these are the very quick and simple ones, nothing overly transformational in this space. So before we move on, what I will say is this won't happen on its own, and you do need to do this now. What I would say is you need to give people the space to actually try things out. However, it does require some guardrails to be put in place with the right tools. There are certain solutions out there that will take the data to train the models. Copilot in this instance for us is in our private cloud, so the data isn't taken to retrain the model. But the teams that are doing this now are the teams that are starting to see the benefits quite quickly. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Sam now, who'll take us through some of the more strategic thinking and bigger ideas around with the use of AI.
Thanks, Matt. And before I start, I just want to do a quick sense check. Can everybody else see the slides? It shows that they're still loading on my screen, but yeah, you guys can see them. Yeah, all right, cool. I can continue. I've got the slides on my other screen anyway. Yeah, so as Matt mentioned, I'm going to talk about strategic capabilities. So these are the bigger, the more complex, the types of solutions that can have a material impact on how financial crime teams might operate. Why do we want to talk about that? Well, mainly because I think Roger alluded to it earlier, the barrier for entry and for building useful technology has come down quite significantly. Capabilities that may have previously required, a large technology program, specialist engineering teams, major vendor implementation projects, they can now be prototyped and accelerated at pace. But that does create a new challenge. If there's more tools available and they're quite easy to use, organizations need to be quite clear on which problems are genuinely worth solving and which aren't. So I'm just going to talk a couple of strong AI use cases that we're seeing through conversations in the market with our clients that could really have potential to address common industry pain points. So the first of those, is KYC information extraction. So what's the problem statement? Well, in today's world, unfortunately, KYC is still a very manual process. Some organizations still have teams of hundreds of KYC analysts who need to manually review documents, perform data entry, which ultimately slows down onboarding times and can create rework. Work and AI play a role here. Well, AIs are really good at this kind of thing. If you train an AI model on specific documents that you would typically see as part of onboarding, what the AI can do is it can extract the relevant information from those documents. It can populate it automatically into whatever case management tool you're using at your organization. And then once it's done that, it can also then look through that to flag anything that's missing or incomplete. What's the benefit of that? Well, from a Lab 1 perspective, there's less manual effort, fewer delays, a smoother onboarding process for customers. And from a Line 2 perspective, where you're going to get better consistency, better data quality, and clearer visibility of the control gaps. The key message here really is that AI is not going to be making the customer decision. It's just all about improving the quality and the speed of the inputs. The second use case around agentic information. So what's the problem there? Well, customer data in today's world is unfortunately still quite fragmented. You might have data points in onboarding systems, TM systems, screening systems, CRM, and that's before you even touch on legacy systems versus new systems running concurrently. This is where, again, agentic AI can play a really helpful role. What it can do is, if you have an agentic agent configured correctly, it can connect across all those different data sources to help you build that much more complete customer profile. Again, from a Line 1 perspective, what does that do? Well, it gives you much faster access to a complete customer profile. And from a Line 2 perspective, that's going to give you better oversight, better QA, check and challenge, because the customer risk view is going to be much more joined up. So really the key message on this use case is, it's about moving us from isolated data points and fragmented risk pictures to a much more full view of customer risk. Moving on to the third one, so SAR narrative generation. So what's the problem here? Well, SAR drafting still does take a lot of time, Analysts often need to pull together data from multiple different sources. They at least look at alert data, investigation notes, customer outcome, any rationale that's been provided. Again, AI is really good at this kind of thing. If you have an AI sitting across that, plugged into all those data, what it can do is it can synthesize a lot of that information and give you a really good structured first draft for that SAR report. What's the benefit here? Well, you're going to get much faster write-up times. You're going to get much more consistent narratives. Whenever you're writing a report, it's much faster to start from, almost a reviewing perspective than writing it all entirely from scratch, which is going to give your analysts a lot more time to do that review, to validate what's on there, to apply their own professional judgment. Key message here really is absolutely we do not want AI to draft these reports and send them out, given the regulatory nature. What we want is the AI to draft that and then let humans decide. So the AI is sort of acting as a co-pilot, very much not autopilot. If I move on to the fourth use case, so automated regulatory obligations mapping. This is something that we've been having a lot of conversations out in the market recently. The problem statement here really is regulatory change is pretty constant. There's always new regulations coming out, minor amendments, new guidance coming out. And the process of reviewing that to understand what your actual distinct obligations are and then mapping that to your internal policies is incredibly manual. Some organizations have tens, hundreds of compliance SMEs who part of their role is to constantly be scanning the market, reviewing it, doing that real manual cross comparison between what's in the regulations to what's in their policies to understand, how well covered they are. Again, AI is really, really good at this. AI can scan those regulatory documents and extract distinct obligations that are applicable. It can then cross compare them to policies and controls to give you an indication of what level of coverage do you have against each of those obligations from a policy perspective, ultimately to surface any potential gaps that you might have. From a benefit perspective, again, this is more on the line 2 side, but what it's going to give you is it's going to give much more proactive oversight and give you much stronger confidence that your obligations are being understood and managed. Key message on this one, again, AI can identify and suggest, but we absolutely would still want compliance teams to validate those interpretations. And I will give a brief demo on this slide in just a moment. But before I move on to that, I just want to emphasize another point which you'll be able to see on the bottom of the slide. Right now, there's a lot of strategic, often top-down push to use AI. People are expecting you to come up with answers as to how you're going to use AI to deliver efficiency, to reduce cost. But we really want to stress here that AI is an enabler, but it's not always going to be the right answer. The goal should always absolutely be to choose the right tool for the job. Sometimes the solution could be as simple as a well-designed rule. It could be a smarter workflow. It could be better quality data. The right tool for the job really is often the most simple one that does the job. So introducing AI where simpler tools would suffice, all that's really going to do is add cost. It's going to add complexity. It's going to add risk to the organization. So before you sort of go down that path of saying, okay, I've got this problem statement, let's use AI, you should really ask yourself that key question that's on the slide right there. Does this problem actually need AI to solve it, or does it just need clearer thinking and a well-defined problem statement? So before I move on to that demo, we've just got another poll I'd like us to pull up, just to get a bit of a sense check on the sort of general sentiment on that last point in the room. So yeah, how confident are you that your organization can assess whether AI is the right tool for a current pain point or challenge? Just give it another minute for those answers to come in. Looks like there's a bit of a mixed bag so far. Okay, so quite an even split really between people that are fairly confident where they know the gaps are and they have a pretty good idea that AI could solve them, or those that are not very confident they want to strengthen that capability. So thanks for all the responses. I will now move on to a quick demo, as I mentioned, on that regulatory obligations point. So bear with me 1 second. Can everybody see that okay? Yeah. Okay, great. So what is this? As I mentioned on the problem statement, mapping, extracting regulatory requirements from regulatory documents and mapping those to policy is an incredibly time-consuming process today. It's a conversation we've been having a lot with a lot of organizations in the market who are really struggling with this. And again, it's something that we think AI can really sort of help to help build, speed up, build up. So what we've gone away and done is we've started to do we've been doing a lot of design thinking on this, and now we've started to codify what a solution could look like. So what you can see on screen now, if you want to understand your regulatory obligations, where do you need to start? Well, you need to have a view of what all those regulations are. So this is quite a simple repository where any regulatory documents applicable to your organization could be uploaded. And once you have those regulatory documents, if I click on, let's just say GDPR, you can drill down into that, and then you can then see a breakdown. And this is where AI can be used. So you've got the GDPR, a super long regulatory body of text. What the AI can then do is go through that, and it can extract a bunch of information. So extinct obligation objects. So one regulatory text, what might be thousands of words, but it may only have 50 actual distinct requirements that you need to adhere to. So in this case, AI has extracted a bunch of requirements, and then you have a bit of a workflow, as I mentioned earlier, where you could have that human in the loop to review and then reject any requirements that the AI has extracted. On top of that, you could then build out some useful dashboards and MI to see at an organization level what your coverage is. Next step, you've got all that regulation. Well, you want to compare it to policy. So again, this is a super simple view of what policy you have in an organization, gives you somewhere to upload that. You can very quickly easily view what policy you've got, upload new versions, archive old versions, all that good stuff. Moving forward again through the story, you've got all your regulations, you've got all your policy. Well, now you want to assess how well you're covered, how well that policy covers you against those regulations. So again, this is where AI could be leveraged to look through all those distinct obligations that I've just talked to, look through all the policy and give an assessment as to what level you're currently covered for those obligations. So again, here's that view of here's all our obligations. Here's where we think we've met some of these obligations. And again, as always, human in the loop, someone to review, approve, reject, amend any of those determinations that the AI has made. And then finally, what's the output of that? Well, it's going to give you as an organization a very clear view of where you have gaps, where your policy right now you don't feel is covering you from a regulatory requirement. Again, a very simple, quick way for you to monitor and track any actions that need to be taken. Maybe you need to go away, update some policy to you feel like you are covered from a policy perspective. That's it, really. Super quick walkthrough. This isn't a marketing session. We want to show this really, not to say how smart we are, how good we are at coding, but it's really to re-emphasize that point I made earlier, that the barrier for entry has dropped quite significantly thanks to AI, and using those tools that are available, which we've relied on with some of these examples, you can really start to accelerate how quickly you test out ideas, play around, see if there's a use case to be made there, so that you can really accelerate and make your own case for change. So I will stop sharing that now. If we can get the slides back up. Okay, perfect. So this segues quite nicely into that. So, very much want people to be out there experimenting, making that case for change. But as a byproduct of that, what we're now also often seeing is a real challenge can then be not coming up with those ideas. It can then be turning those ideas into something that's controlled, scalable, and genuinely useful. And this is where we're seeing more and more a lot of organizations getting stuck, almost what we're calling a pilot purgatory. You've got loads of these ideas, these great ideas underway, but none of them actually make it that full end-to-end to go into production. And that can happen for a variety of reasons, right? Ownership could be unclear. Who owns the solution? Who needs to build the solution? The business case might not be strong enough, so it just gets rejected. The data might not be ready for it. There might be governance questions around it that get left too late. So then the risk really is that AI just becomes this series of interesting experiments rather than a managed change journey. So if we look at the diagram on the screen, we've sort of split this into 3 distinct stages that can help you sort of navigate that challenge. So stage 1, open experimentation. So really the question at this stage is, well, can this actually work at all? So this is where ideas can, or teams, can explore ideas, they can test prompts, they can build basic prototypes to start to understand where AI can create real value. But that stage absolutely does need boundaries. You know, experimentation needs to happen with approved tools. We wouldn't want people just going off and just putting data out there, God knows where. You know, it needs to be done within the confines of acceptable use policies, data protection rules. And like I said, this is all around testing ideas, figuring out, could this actually go somewhere to solve a challenge that we have? And at this stage, you should progress only if there's enough evidence that the use case does address a real business problem. If the idea doesn't pass that stage gate, you can stop it, park it. That shouldn't be seen as a failure. It's good discipline. It means that you're not wasting time experimenting on things that aren't actually going to deliver value. As we move forward into stage 2, so controlled proof of concept, here the question changes to, well, is the benefit really worth the cost? So this is where firms will need to test the use case against more realistic data, workflows, operating conditions. The success here needs to be measured, and this could be measured, you know, in a variety of ways, right? Productivity gains, reduced rework rates, better risk insights, anything really where you can say, yeah, you know what, this has actually delivered value. This is where you would also need to start thinking about things like ownership, controls, testing, data quality, how it would fit into your current operating model. You don't necessarily need to have all the answers to these questions at this stage, but you want to really be thinking about that. So if it does progress, you've already got those good foundations and you have a good idea. Really, the key message here is a POC should not only prove that the technology is impressive, as a lot of AI is. It should prove that the use case is valuable and feasible for your organization. And again, talking about gating criteria to progress to stage 3, you really only want to progress here if there's clear evidence across benefit, feasibility, risk, governance, ownership, all those things. Again, if the evidence there isn't strong enough, you could park it, you could redesign it, sort of go back to the drawing board, see how it works, or you could even keep it as a limited productivity tool. You know, don't roll it out to the team en masse. Maybe you could keep it for yourself or the other small team that worked on it if it does do little bits here and there to support your day-to-day. So then stage 3, so production delivery. At this point, the question really becomes, well, can this actually run safely, reliably, and defensively at scale? Here it becomes very different to that open experimentation. A production solution needs to be stable. It needs to be monitored for performance degradation. It needs to have clear owners, accountability, and it needs to be supportable. So as it probably indicates from production delivery, this is where you actually build a solution. But alongside that, you need to do all the standard things that you would with a bit of software implementation or development. You know, you need to confirm ownership, accountability, responsibility, routes of escalation. You need to put controls and monitoring in place. You need to perform detailed testing of the solution. So this is really where you're going to have to bring together all those different parts of the organization, you know, governance, model risk, compliance, tech and data teams, the businesses themselves. Everyone needs to come together. And without that, you risk creating solutions that are really difficult to explain, govern, or rely on at scale. So looking across those 3 stages, the story really is about stage by stage increasing confidence. The aim is to strike the right balance between having that freedom to experiment early on, but having the right structure to scale the right ideas in a safe way. I don't necessarily need to talk about the stuff on the right-hand side of the slide. They're more just sort of probing questions that you could ask yourself as you sort of move through those stages of that journey. So before I hand over to Roger for the next part, I will just again ask if we can get that another one of those polls up on screen, just to get the audience's insights onto how they're experiencing this journey from experimentation. So again here, so what are the biggest barriers to moving AI use cases from pilot to production in your organization today? Okay, data quality very quickly taking the lead. That's not totally unsurprising. Okay, yeah, data quality. That is, yeah, it's a very common issue that we see a lot. So not completely surprised at that one. Okay, so Roger, over to you. Oh, I think we've skipped a slide there.
There we go. Couldn't find the mic button, so sorry about that. So thank you. So hopefully some examples there resonate, but let us know in the comments and through the polls, obviously. I'll just share some final thoughts in terms of some takeaways, and then we'll launch the final poll and then finish off with the Q&A. Some questions have been coming through, so we'll go through as many of those as we can. So first, again, I think a very exciting time. We've got some really amazing tools at our disposal today. We've shared a few examples of how these can be used for some use cases, but the list of use cases is obviously endless and unique to each of you. If you're early in the journey, my counsel is to get started because I think waiting carries an opportunity cost. The tools are here, so get experimenting, learn as a team, understand your blockers and work through them. There's lots of small things that you can do now that will build your team's AI fluency. And I think building that fluency, starting to get some of those quick wins will build internal confidence and momentum. And then that kind of helps you then start to tackle the bigger and more strategic challenges of the future. Second, perhaps most critical point in my view is starting with the problem, not with the solution. So particularly important for the more strategic challenges that you need support to deliver. Hopefully the problem statement doesn't include how can I use AI to ... It should really be an articulation of your business problem and the outcomes you're looking for. What we're trying to avoid is the misalignment between the business, the compliance team, and your tech teams. Because tech teams have been known to create Rolls-Royce solutions when really all you needed was a bicycle. I have definitely been guilty of doing that in the past. So kind of a real world example of this happening. I think some of you probably will be familiar with this. You'll know which firm I'm talking about when I go through this example. So let's say where the tech team is given an AI mandate, they're asked to support a new typology where they need to flag transactions over a certain threshold between certain jurisdictions. So that tech team, in this real world example, they decided to update their machine learning to detect that typology. Lots of heavy lifting. They updated their rules in the vendor monitoring solution. They updated their model risk management, lots of testing, etc. It took months to roll that out. And it had some negative consequences in terms of those typologies not being detected for several months, and the regulator was involved in an investigation on this one. But that problem is actually really black and white and simple, in my view. So the quick and elegant solution there could have been a SQL script that checks for that typology by continuously running against the transaction ledger. That could be rolled out in 24 hours and would require basically no maintenance. So that kind of bicycle solution would allow for an immediate risk response. But because the tech team were given an AI mandate, they were asked to use AI for as many kind of problems as possible. And that was part of the problem statement. They spent months trying to solve that, trying to detect that typology. So let us know if you're seeing that kind of misalignment issue, because it's very typical in terms of what we see. Final point, just in terms of taking a thoughtful and structured approach. In terms of structured, what we mean there is like how you go about ideation, how you then evaluate those ideas, and then understand the simplest, the most elegant solution option. And then how you take those ideas through a pilot process, through a POC process that has as short a path to production as possible. Trying to avoid spending months creating a governance framework before you start. You can do that in parallel, by testing and embedding the controls that explain the specific outputs you need for that specific use case. And also consider talking to the regulator during that testing process to validate your approach for explainability, and making sure that they think that approach is fit for purpose. The door is definitely open for that. And then in terms of taking a thoughtful approach, I think this just goes back to aligning to the problem statement, but also on picking the right tool for the job. As I just said, AI isn't always the answer, but when AI is the right answer, I think it's important to select the right AI tools in the toolbox because it each has their own strengths and weaknesses. So we've seen a few examples today, I think, that Matthew took us through. They used Microsoft Copilot because the vast majority of our clients have access to this. So it's quite good to kind of show those tools because, you know, most of you will be able to build those very quickly. But Copilot isn't the right answer for everything. It's not good at nested searches, which basically means digging into multi-layered websites. Nearly every website is built in that way. So what we've seen in our testing of horizon scanning tools, we've found that actually you can do that with Gemini really well, which shouldn't be a surprise because Gemini is powered by Google. So, you know, that's choosing the right tool for the job, which I think is critical. And I think just experimenting with what's out there will help give you the knowledge, the AI fluency to point you to the right tool. Okay, I think we can now move to the final poll. And while we post that, I'll start looking through the questions as well. Okay, great. We'll move on then from the poll. Obviously, you can continue to answer that, but yeah, interesting responses. I think some of those quick wins and strategic kind of plays are resonating with some people. So that's good to know. Obviously, have some follow-up discussions there. Also, some good questions in the chat. So thank you for those. So the first one. Let me pull that one up. How can MI be synthesized by AI when drawing from multiple sources, including unstructured data, to create a consistent and integrated view of reliable data? Sam, do you mind if I point to you for that? Because obviously you're reporting.
Yeah, sure. I guess my initial thoughts on that is you would still absolutely need to have a very well-defined MI framework before AI can do anything. You know, you still need to have a very clear articulation, who the data owners are, what are the metric definitions, and that can vary by business lines. That can vary in a lot of different ways. If people aren't all on the same page on what you mean by a particular metric, then you get, like, the AI isn't going to help solve anything. You want to have a good picture of what good looks like. But then once you have that picture and once you have data in one place, what AI is very good at is doing things that humans maybe sometimes aren't very good at. So summarizing trends, identifying inconsistencies that to the naked human eye might not look like an inconsistency, but AI is very good at that statistical analysis. You know, it can explain movements, it can draft narratives. There's a lot of stuff it can do once the foundations are right to really sort of help build out that sort of picture of what's going on. Matt, I don't know if you have anything else you'd want to add on that.
Yeah, I think one of the core challenges here, I guess we're trying to answer, is around ingestion, normalization, even reconciliation across multiple, and if we're including emails, right, messy data sets that's not very structured. So you could, but it comes back to one of Roger's closing points of, is AI the right tool? But in theory, you could use AI pipelines to ingest multiple formats. So Excel files, CSVs, PDFs, emails into a structured database simultaneously. So using document parsing, OCR, email body extraction to pull out the raw content and format it into a structured format would be one application. You'd use another AI to normalize it, run any entity resolution if you need to make sure things like cust ID is customer number, client ref, for example, is also customer number, etc. You can then have a separate AI to look at if there's any contradiction between the data sets, if there, for example, any data quality issues in the data. So if you've got a date field and you've got customer names in there, for example, or other examples along that line. So you can then start to ask, is the data quality good enough to actually build MI? And then following on from kind of Sam's point around, you can then use AI to spot those trends, write the narratives, etc., which I think is a very good use case initially for it. I think some of the things just to be careful on, well, it's the same with anything, right? Around the quality of the MI that you build using AI is as good as the source data quality. So bad data in, bad data out, what we're all used to seeing. But hopefully that answers your question.
Super. Thanks, chaps. So I'll take another question. So it's quite a broad one. How can I build my AI skills and my teams? So from my side, I think, working on AI fluency is critical because it helps you understand what's possible, basically. So I think experimenting with whatever you're allowed to use, and within the work environment, whether that's Copilot, Claude, Gemini, whatever those tools are, consider experimenting outside of the work environment as well, as long as you're being careful with your data usage. So doing that as well. In terms of kind of building your team's knowledge as well, there's lots of different ways to do it, but one method that we did actually a few months ago internally, actually we recently ran a hackathon. So it was just a really engaging kind of process to help bring everybody up to speed with the tools today. And we used it to actually develop some AI tools. We just made it fun, but it was a really good kind of learning thing. Is really energizing as well. Anything from you, Sam or Matthew, in terms of how to build up those skills?
Yeah, sure. I'd completely agree with what you say. I think that the key thing really is AI fluency. You don't need everybody to be data scientists. What you really want is, and this is applicable for line 1 and line 2, is you want people to really understand the art of the possible. So you want people in your team to be able to ask better questions of AI tools and vendors. I know it can be challenging at times going out speaking to vendors. Everything looks really flashy, really impressive. Looking at that and being like, well, how do we know it actually works? That is a skill, and it can be quite difficult. But I guess the more that you build your own understanding of AI and sort of what's possible, you can be a bit more critical of those. Another thing is around AI fluency is being able to challenge outputs and apply sound judgment. I think the way that I always treat outputs of AI is just with healthy skepticism. So, don't trust implicitly everything that it says. And then a really good one, and one that I've certainly got better at over the past 18 months, is prompt engineering. So how you actually interact with AI models, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever it is that you use, how you actually interact with that and sort of ask what you want it to do. I wouldn't maybe go as far as to say treat it like a 5-year-old. It's probably a bit smarter than that, but maybe treat it like, I don't know, if it's a graduate you've just got straight out of uni, joined your team, maybe speak to the model like you would maybe speak to them when you're asking them for help on something, just to really articulate exactly what it is that you do, because otherwise the models can make a lot of assumptions and then people can get quite frustrated in that process. So yeah, AI fluency.
Yeah, I think that's a good point around the prompt engineering, Sam. I think there's a bit of an art to that. Well, probably an art and a science. So I was talking to a data scientist recently who kind of helped me figure out how to do it even better. So maybe we could share something on that actually after the session, kind of how we see kind of good prompt engineering. So it just helps you talk to your AI, get the answer in 1 or 2 questions rather than 50 back and forth. Another question. Oh, there you go. Nicole, would you be able to provide us with a webinar? Okay, great. For prompts engineering? Yes. We'll follow up afterwards. That's great. Another question regarding how long would it take to build and test some of the things that you've demonstrated? I think for the quick wins, minutes or hours, really. So that should be very quick. What I'd also say is that, we'd be happy to share how we did that, in terms of building those quick wins out so that you can rebuild those yourself if you want to, if you're not already using those. So let us know and we'll send you the instructions. The tool that Sam showed, that reg obligations tool, so there are market solutions for that. So we've reviewed those market solutions and I guess came away not super impressed. Hence why we started building it ourselves. So we see that taking a few months to get fully deployed in a client environment and aligned to the client's internal processes. But then it will be, there's no process retrofitting to that. It's completely bespoke, much lower cost. So there is that. Any other questions?
I'll just add on that before we move on, and I appreciate we do have only 3 minutes left, is on that sort of length to build. I think it very much depends on where you are in those stages that I spoke through. We're absolutely not saying, to Roger's point, that you can build an enterprise grade solution to do all these great things in a week. Absolutely not. But if you're earlier on in that process and you're just trying to prove the value and maybe build a business case to have some change, then yeah, maybe that is something that you want to do over a short time period, over a couple of days, over a week, just so that you can then sort of prove that there is potentially value to be made and you can help build that business case internally. And same on the testing side of it, that should scale very much with where you are in that journey.
Yeah, good point, well made. Thank you. So I think that's pretty much us at time. So thanks so much for your time and engaging in this and all the answers that you've given us and in the polls and the questions and things. Really great to see that. And we'll make the recording available. So if we've missed anything, any questions, or you've asked for a follow-up, we'll follow up after this. Either way, we hope you found the session useful. So let us know about that. And thanks again. Have a good day. We'll close the webinar now.
Thanks, up. Really appreciate it.